One of the reasons the 80s is so beloved is all the great music that came out of that decade. From the many amazing albums of the pop genre to the new genre of hip-hop and in between. Today we're going to take a look back at the top 10 albums released in the 80s. To make it fair, with many artists that have multiple albums in that decade, we pick the opinionated best album from such artists. Now remember, this is a top 10 list that is strictly based on surveys and votes, but I would love to hear your feedback whether you agree or disagree, and remember to keep it respectful. Keep that 80s feel in our comment section. As always, before we get started, make sure to go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to see more top 10 videos from us, be sure to smash that like button. Also, be sure to leave a comment with your favorite album from the 80s below. And feel free to click the links below if you want to follow along with some of the albums or just reacquaint yourself with that special memory from the 80s. Okay, so let's get to it. Cue that intro. The 80s was a special time for music. The public had just had enough with disco, and pop was taking over again with a new genre. Rap music was getting to the point where people were now recognizing this was going to be more than just a fad. Our first album on the list is from this hip-hop genre. NWA's Straight Outta Compton comes in at our number 10 album of the 80s. This was NWA's debut studio album. NWA was the rap group that introduced us to the members Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Eazy-E, MC Ren, and DJ Yella. Straight Outta Compton was released on August 8, 1988 under Ruthless Priority Records and released 3 singles from the 13-track album. Straight Outta Compton was like having the door kicked open with trend-setting gangsta and hip-hop. With songs like Express Yourself showcasing what the group was about on personal and individual levels, while songs like Straight Outta Compton shed light on the injustice social systems that was happening in California and other parts of the country. This was the first rap album to receive a 5-star rating from Rolling Stone magazine and was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in November 2016. The group also received a lot of recognition for one of the songs that was not released titled F the Police, which ignited the group-long beef with the police that prompted an arrest after performing the song while on tour in Detroit. What the press and police thought would crush or silence them actually helped them with free marketing, getting them much more fans on a national rate. Many years later, Dr. Dre and Ice Cube would get together to put together a biopic about the group with the same name as the debut album, which was released in 2015 to rave reviews. This album helped open the door for the likes of artists like Snoop Dogg and 50 Cent decades later. Number 9 on our list belongs to the most successful album of Paul Simon, 1986's Graceland. Paul Simon was the sole producer on this album, covering all 11 tracks. This was the 7th studio album from Paul, and would peak at number 3 on the Billboard's 200. The album went on to win the 1987 Grammy Award for Album of the Year, and is currently sitting at 5 times platinum and selling over 16 million records worldwide. Due to the influence that it had on many artists, fans, and society in whole, it is argued as one of the greatest albums of all time, with popular singles like Diamonds on the Sole of Her Shoes and You Can Call Me Al, the latter having a very creative, if not simple, video starring Chevy Chase. The album was also added to the U.S. National Recording Registry in 2006 as culturally, historically, or aesthetically important. Graceland was recorded during 1985 and 1986, with Simon's connections made from his time spent in Johannesburg. The album features eclectic mixtures of genres, including pop, rock, a cappella, zydeco, and more. In 2018, Sony Music and Legacy Records issued Graceland the Remixes, which was an album remix from the original album by other artists like Paul Oakenfold and Groove Armada, among others, showing just how timeless this album is. The last rap album to make our list belongs to another 1986 classic album. This one is from Reverend Run, Jam Master Jay, and DMC, or more collectively known as Run DMC. Raising Hell falls into our number 8 slot. Run DMC produced 4 albums in the 80s and would go on to be held in high regards with names like LL Cool J, Public Enemy, and the Beastie Boys for helping pioneer new school hip hop. The album was certified platinum within 2 months of its release, and is currently a 3 times platinum selling album. This was the very first rap album to be certified platinum and stamped the statement that the genre was here to stay. The album was produced by Russell Simmons on the profile Arista Records. The 4 singles released from this album were You Be Illin', It's Tricky, My Adidas, and Walk This Way, featuring Aerosmith. Walk This Way charted as high as number 4 on the Billboard single chart. This track helped Aerosmith restart their career, and the success also brought Run DMC into the mainstream and rock industry. Another one of their release singles, My Adidas, helped Adidas break into the hip-hop industry with support by many neighborhoods purchasing the Adidas Superstars, which was being worn and rapped about by Run DMC, having the first ever major sneaker endorsements to any rap artist. To this day, Run DMC is still recognized as Adidas brand ambassadors due to large recognition in the hip-hop world in the 80s. Our number 7 album on our countdown belongs to Bruce Springsteen. The 7th studio album, and might I add, not even the favorite album in the 80s from Bruce himself, as he has stood by his word that Nebraska is the better album. Born in the USA, released on June 4, 1984 to rave reviews. Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band would make 5 studio albums in the 80s, with one being live recorded performances from 1975 to 1985. Bruce wrote all 12 tracks on the 15-time platinum album that would go on to peak at number 1 on the Billboard charts. Born in the USA produced 7 top 10 Billboard charting singles, including Born in the USA, Glory Days, My Hometown, and Dancing in the Dark, the video that would introduce the world to the young Courtney Cox. This would be Bruce Springsteen's most commercially successful album of his 20-album career to date, selling over 30 million records worldwide. This was a fitting album for the 80s pop era, although it was definitely rock and roll and still my personal favorite album from Bruce Springsteen. Another artist's debut album falls into our number 6 spot. Appetite for Destruction from Guns N' Roses would be released in 1987 with the original classic lineup of Slash, Izzy Stradlin, Duff Rose McKagan, Steve Adler, and Axl Rose. Appetite for Destruction would release 5 singles, with 3 of them hitting the top 10 and Sweet Child of Mine reaching number 1. Although the album was not fully accepted within its first year of existence, only picking up steam after touring, the album now holds the record for the best-selling debut album of all time, having sold over 30 million copies worldwide. This isn't even counting the remastered version of the album released in 2018 sales. Appetite for Destruction is 18 times platinum with great rock classics like Welcome to the Jungle that is still being played in many sports arenas and stadiums. Rolling Stone ranks the album at number 62 of greatest albums of all time, and it was ranked number 32 on Rock Hall of Fame's definitive 200 albums list. The band would have some other successful platinum selling albums, albeit with multiple lineup changes, with Axl Rose being the constant, but would never taste as much success as they had with their debut release. Whitney Houston burst onto the music scene in 1985 with her self-titled debut release on February 14th. The Prom Queen of Soul lands at number 5 on our list. Although we had another great album to choose from in Whitney, released in 1987, with songs like I Wanna Dance with Somebody and So Emotional. As great as that album was, it doesn't hold up to the record-breaking success of Whitney's debut. Whitney Houston was widely regarded as the album of the year with 3 number 1 charting singles: Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, Greatest Love of All. The album peaked at number 1 on the Billboard charts, holding down that spot for 14 consecutive weeks, and is considered one of the best debut albums of all time, selling over 22 million copies worldwide. It remained on the Billboard 200 for an amazing 162 weeks. Whitney received 4 Grammy nominations and would win 1 for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a Female. Whitney received positive responses from critics for her vocal prowess, and this is really shown off in the 25th Anniversary Deluxe Edition album that has an a cappella version of How Will I Know that is just breathtaking. If you haven't heard it yet, go take a listen and come back and leave a comment. Possibly the most all-around talented entertainer of the 80s, Prince locks down our number 4 spot. With over 9 albums to choose from, released in the 80s, this was not easy. Great albums like Sign of the Times or Parade, or the album that stamped Prince's celebrity footprint in the industry, 1999, with hits like 1999, Little Red Corvette, and Automatic. But Purple Rain, released in the summer of 1984, His sixth studio album was just such a masterpiece of an album that solidified Prince as he became the figurehead to follow for pop music going forward. Prince would go on to write all lyrics and compositions of all the tracks on the album. Purple Rain would go on to be the soundtrack to the accompanying name of the film that also had much success, starring Prince and Apollonia. Purple Rain peaked at number 1 on the Billboard charts and spent 24 total weeks in that position, and held a position on the charts for a total of 122 weeks. This would be Prince's very first album to ever reach that number 1 position on the Billboard charts. It currently is a 13 times platinum selling album with over 25 million copies, sold worldwide and growing. Although there are only 9 total tracks, each track shows Prince's musical mind at work, pushing the envelope. This is definitely a quality over quantity album. 3 out of the released 5 singles charted top 5 on the Billboards, with 2 of those charting at number 1. Prince and the Revolution would win the '84 Grammy Award for Best Rock Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group, and would win an '85 Oscar for Best Original Song Score. Songs like When Doves Cry and Let's Go Crazy had almost night and day feels, but were both accepted as hit singles. The song Darling Nikki, which was not officially released as a single, helped give Prince the attention he loved to get by testing the waters of love, fashion, music, sex, and provocativeness. Out of Prince's very long career discography, Purple Rain stands out as arguably his best work and his most pop-orientated album. Time magazine currently has the album ranked as the second greatest album of all time, behind the Beatles' Help. Down to our last 2 albums on our list for the top spot for best album of the 80s. The number 3 spot on our list goes out to one of our very favorite women of the 80s, Madonna. Madonna released 4 great albums in the 80s, some much better than the others, but our decision lies between her 2 first album releases. And another artist's debut album, the self-titled album Madonna, was just filled with good music that was needed in the 80s and is even still appreciated and played today at parties and holidays. The album was released on July 27th, 1983, and Rolling Stone magazine credits this album as pointing the future direction for Janet Jackson and Debbie Gibson. Although the album may have only peaked at number 5 on the Billboard charts, it is currently 5 times platinum and has sold over 10 million copies worldwide. The album had a total of 8 tracks on the original release, with 5 of those released as singles. Madonna was the sole writer on the album and the driving force in the direction of the album, so much so that she replaced the original executive producer with John Jellybean Benitez to help capture the sound Madonna was looking for. Not only did the album practically steer the lane for where pop music would go, but it also helped set the fashion trend with the mix of tight and loose, dark and loud colored clothing that Madonna would wear in her videos and on stage during her performances. Even today, normally when someone thinks of fashion in the 80s, Madonna normally comes to mind. All 5 singles released received great response by critics, fans, and the club scene. Songs like Borderline and Lucky Star satisfied the romance, while songs like Everybody and Holiday checked off the box to fill the fix that Madonna had for dance. Any one of the released 5 singles still has a very high chance of popping into any 80s radio station rotation today. Many songs from the album still make you want to dance when you hear it. Janet Jackson's 4th studio album, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814, takes a spot as the number 2 album of the 80s. This album was the second consecutive album to peak at number 1 on the Billboard charts for Janet. The first being my personal favorite of Janet's 80s albums, Control. Janet would write the majority of songs and would also co-produce Rhythm Nation 1814 with songwriters and producers Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jams, who had just recently left Prince's circle. This album encapsulates the new jack swing craze that was sweeping through the R&B industry that Teddy Riley had started. The album also mixes genres of hard rock, pop, dance, and industrial music, ranging from mechanized dance rhythms to soft balladry, reaching multiple radio platforms. Her label A&M Records wanted something more like Control. In fact, they even suggested she make a Control 2, but Janet shut that down, wanting to use her platform to sing about things that she was passionate about, including social issues. Rhythm Nation has a record-setting 7 top 5 hit singles on the Billboard Hot 100, with 4 grabbing the top spots, those being Miss You Much, my personal favorite track from the album, Escapade, Black Cat, and Love Will Never Do. Rhythm Nation took video making to another level of greatness, and what we would come to expect from Janet from that point forward. Two of my all-time favorite music videos from the 80s are singles from this album. Either video for Alright, with or without Heavy D, but more specifically, I love the extended version and all the choreographed dance and classic old school apparel. Rhythm Nation 1814 is currently 6 times platinum and has sold over 12 million copies worldwide. It is the pinnacle in Janet Jackson's long legendary Hall of Fame career. Because Janet took full control of this album, she was able to touch on topics that weren't really mainstream at the time. Her music on the album explores racism, poverty, substance abuse, domestic and mental abuse, to name a few of some of the serious topics on the album that she wanted to shine light on. Because of this, Janet became the role model to youth, and she proudly embraced this role. The video for Rhythm Nation also made Janet a fashion icon of the 80s and the early 90s for the ensemble that her and the nation sported. It would be an era of black clothes and shiny metals. The dance moves in this video are ones that would rival her big bro Michael. And just like Michael would do, this video for Rhythm Nation has a 30-minute screenplay that was produced that accompanied the release. Janet would receive 9 Grammy nominations for the album and would be the first woman to be nominated for Producer of the Year. Think about that. Not win. Not the first woman to win, but the first woman to be nominated for a Grammy for Producer of the Year. And this is in 1989. This would be the album that closed off the 80s perfectly and set the bar for what the 90s R&B and pop artists would have to bring. Well, I just want to take time to say thank you for watching our content. We really do appreciate it. And again, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and go ahead and smash that like button. It really helps us out with growing the channel. So you've seen the top 9 albums of the 80s so far. Anything you would change? Do you think you know who holds down the #1 spot?
You ain't gonna get it, you know.
Go ahead, leave the comments on who you think holds the #1 album of the 80s. Go ahead, I'll give you a second. And of course, who else could it be but the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. But what album out of the 2 released in the 80s from MJ claims the #1 spot for our top 10 album of the 80s? Is it Bad or is it Thriller? Both music masterpieces and both record-breaking albums. Thriller is one of the most selling albums of all time throughout the world. From hits like Beat It, Wanna Be Starting Something, and Billie Jean to the amazing video for the title track that changed the expectation of what a great music video should be. But our crowning MJ album of the 80s belongs to the 1987 release, Bad. This album dived deeper into MJ's personal life with tracks like Man in the Mirror, Leave Me Alone, and Another Part of Me, but also quenched the 80s need with that pop sound that resonated so well with Mike of the 80s in songs like Smooth Criminal, which is my favorite single released from the album, and the title song Bad, which starts off the album in a great pace. The album mixes pop, rock, funk, R&B, dance, soul, and even hard rock. This would be Mike's 7th studio album. Bad would debut #1 on the Billboard Top Pop Albums and peaked #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, remaining in the top 5 for 38 weeks. All 7 singles released charted in the top 20 on the Billboard, with 5 of them breaking records, holding down the #1 spots on the chart. This would be the final album that MJ and Quincy Jones would collaborate on. Bad is still known as the most anticipated album in history due to the success of Thriller and the 5-year wait by the public for Bad to arrive. Selling 2 million copies in its first week and now sitting at over 35 million copies sold worldwide. Bad was introduced or promoted with a film called Moonwalker, which also included music videos and became the best-selling home video of all time. Bad also produced the highest-grossing solo artist world tour, earning $125 million, which was equivalent to over $254 million for inflation today. This helped MJ chart #1 on billboards in 24 different countries. This album would cover media bias, paranoia, racial profiling, romance, self-improvement, and world peace, resonating a certain space in most people's heart with everything that was happening in the 80s. Michael Jackson's Bad defined what the sound of pop should and would be, officially giving him his crown, the king of pop. So, did you agree with the list? Again, what would you change if anything? With so many debut albums that are still listened to today, we got to see how much talent was bloomed in the 80s. So many things the 80s got right, and music is most definitely one of them. What did you learn about some of these artists in the 80s? Leave a comment below, and please smash that like button if you enjoyed our list or want to see more top 10 countdowns on the channel. Thanks again for watching and supporting the channel. Check out some of our previous videos here. If you're new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time.